Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. O.P. Verma from Himachal Pradesh University Shimla. Today we are going to talk on module organization change, integration and future needs. From paper organizational change and development. After completing this module, you will be able to understand the meaning of integration of the system and sustaining the change. Tipping point reference to understand the concept of planned organizational change. Different elements to be considered while changing the organization. Future needs of the organizational change and development concept. Let's start with the introduction. For an organization which is in its continuing phase, change is inseparable. If a business entity wants to stand parallel with the changing environment, it becomes imperative to adapt environmental driven changes accordingly. Organizational change is a planned process which is intentional as well as goal oriented. Collective efforts are the major requirement for any change to happen in an organization. Dealing with the resistance is the major task that needs to be dealt with due care. The integration and sustaining the required change is the tough task. When we are talking about the integration, then we simply mean that we are combining or interrelating two or more things so as to form a new thing. And if we correlate the integration with sustaining, it drives us to the fact that we want to continue or make permanent existence of the new thing that has been formed. But we are familiar with the fact that organization change is something that never occurs in a planned and orderly manner. The text ahead deals with the factors related to the integration and various elements of change process and the factors that can facilitate the easy sustaining of the change. It also throws a light on the future needs in context to the organizational change. The first feature relates to the concept of spreading the change to others, causing other people to feel or act a similar way. In a very simple way, it can be understood as spreading cold or flu, or there can be many examples which can relate, like watching a movie you like and telling others to watch or singing the songs. The very common example which Gladwell used relates to considering yawning as a contagion. The second feature which Gladwell emphasized relates to small things that can cause a big effect or can bring big consequences. There is a general perception that to have large impact we need to perform something big, but that does not fit in every situation. Sometimes it may happen that the change spreads and it keeps on doubling itself instead of increasing in proportion. Therefore, those who are born to get affected must prepare themselves in accordance with the fact that big changes follow from small events. The claim that Gladwell holds for the third characteristic is somehow difficult to accept. It says that change does not happen gradually but at one dramatic moment. This could be true for the general public, but from what we understand about organizational transformation concept, it becomes fairly easy to accept. For example, the emergence of computerization, fax machine, mobile phone, or other technological breakthrough. Applying the tipping point philosophy to planned organization change. Now coming on to the very aspect of implementing the principle of Gladwell 2000 book to suggest ways and means for implanting the planned organizational change process. Takes us to understand the basic characteristics of these principles and then making a relationship of these principles with the actual environment within which the organization is working. The basic presumption that lies here is to understand the change concept thoroughly, and also the fact that small activities collectively can have large consequences. Here, the management needs to plan the process and determine how to spread the change virus and cause an epidemic. In other words, it can be understood from the perspective of searching for the reason that would be validating the need for organization change. It is the responsibility of the management that it search for those connectors which would help to further the process. These connectors are the one which makes certain that our change, vision, goals, and directions work in the desired direction. They play heed to the fact that the change objectives become reality and our goals become attainable. At the same time, management also needs to make sure that other relevant principles regarding organization change are also well addressed, which relates to dealing with resistance, factors causing disequilibrium, unanticipated consequences, and ways of sustaining the change process. For the convenience purpose, we can divide the whole planned organization change process in four phases, that is, pre launch, launch, post launch, and sustaining the change, and then systematically apply Gladwell's principle to the process. Pre launch. The first step relates to framing the message effectively and efficiently, that it can have impact on the recipients of the change. Thus, of course, it says about the context and the change vision, goals, as well as direction. Providing clarity regarding the organizational change, purpose, and direction helps in easy implementation. The message which the management is delivering must stick to fulfill the objectives. Therefore, it is always preferable to cast it in the form of story that can be easy to remember and communicate as well. Also, for this phase, another important element is to search for the connectors who would be delivering the message. While selecting them, the management must search for these persons who are interested in stating the exact message and have the social power to convince the other side. The other thing management must keep in mind is that the focus is to select the best one and is not on training them to be best, adding extra cost to the organization. Once these connectors get the content and accept it, they will follow these conscious regarding what to do and how to achieve it using their natural motives and abilities. The launch. In this phase, the connectors which the management chose for the further implementation of the task go forth to spread the message. These facilitators do certain tasks by forming the major elements for the implementation of the change, like getting people together for common tasks, helping to plan an initial event, facilitating the transactive memories, helping people connect to each other, persuading people regarding the importance of the change, and hence communicating effectively regarding the need for change. Post launch. Management must keep into perspective that the change that they are planning to implement requires multiple repetition for remembrance. In other words, management must not only rely on a particular singular change intervention to do the job, rather, it must go for delivering the same message multiple times on different intervals. The connectors must try to communicate the message in multiple ways and determine which way works best, at least for a particular period of time. Repetition of the message is essential. Repetition together with the captivating story makes the message stay for a considerable period of time. Sustaining the change. In many ways, accentuated the change in the organization is an essential element to fulfill the objective of bringing planned organization change. The most important task in sustaining the change is to deal with the unanticipated consequences of initiatives. While launching the change process, the management usually forecasts the consequences or effects, but they need to remain conscious with each step and change to another approach required to keep the change going. Thus, sustaining change means dealing with the unforeseen outcomes that can become a barrier to the change effort and take swift actions with different initiatives and tactics to ensure momentum while new paths towards the change goals. A key element which forms a contributing factor to the success of organization performance in general and organization change in particular is when people perceive how their regular activities and tasks support the organization mission and strategy to succeed the organizational established goals. Changing the organization. Changing the organizational scenario from different perspectives is in real terms a difficult task. To integrate different working subsystem of the organization calls for raising some key questions and critical issues concerning the organization as well as organization change. Six major points are explained as follows. First, relates to assessing the external environment. The management actually has a strong concern for the environment in which the organization is working. They are continuously engaged in monitoring and scrutinizing the environment. But the cause of concern which lies here is that if they are focusing on the right areas, gathering appropriate information, and seeking right opinion from the primary constituents, the primary concern areas are customer. Every organization's prime focus lies on its customers. There are many questions that may be asked from them regarding the satisfaction with the quality of the product or services, regarding the satisfaction from grievance system. Asking customers questions concerning these problems are surely going to help the organization in the sense that it would be able to assess what the customers are hinting on towards what the customers are directing the organization. In addition to this, the management get to know the focus areas for the future. In other words, organization must try to decode the signs or hints customers are giving with their behavior or attitude directly or indirectly for their expectation in the future years. Market. Fluctuations in the financial markets are a cause of concern for any business. How the stock prices are doing, what does the analyst evaluate? Is there concern on the part of investors to buy more shares? How feasible is for the organization to raise money from markets concerning activities such as acquisition, introducing new technology, expanding business line. These questions bring concern for the organization. Mission. It is equally important that management time to time keeps on assessing the mission of the organization for which it came into existence. Questions regarding the relevance of the organization mission need to be scrutinized time and again. Moreover, the system must also assess if various constituents are appropriately responded well in time. Competition. Management needs to remain aware regarding different moves and tactics of their competitors. It must rank the organization as well as the competitors to know the real position. The organization system needs to remain well aware with the diversification and expansion strategies of their competitors regarding their research and development objectives, reasons behind low cost service delivery model, segmentation strategies for the market, etc. Technology. Proper assessment and evaluation needs to be done to know where the organization stands in terms of technology. Is the organization up to date or falling behind? It is pertinent to check if the organization is using the right kind of technology. There may be a situation that the organization requires a change to be done on a particular area when it is lacking or bringing cost. There are other additional areas of the external environment that also needs to be considered. These factors include change in the government regulations, changes in the economic dimensions, shifts in the demographic variables, natural environmental factors, and so on. Depending on the industry and the uniqueness of the organization, these factors affect the organization. Second calls for the assessment of the internal working of the organization. It includes assessing the internal organization structure, policies, conditions, technology, hierarchy, etc. A deeper look must be given to the core areas of business, which gives the organization a competitive edge over the others. Questions like, do we change some of the business lines and remain with our core, or is there a need to change our business altogether? Bringing any change which calls for larger effort to make a shift from the present prevailing situation needs a proper assessment with due care and proper course of action to achieve the desired results. Third, assessing the readiness of the organization for the change also needs to be reassessed. It is important to check the degree of change that the organization can handle at a specific point of time. The question which lies here relates to how fast and how deep should be the pace of the change process. There are many kinds of change that can be implemented. It can be evolutionary or can be revolutionary or can be both. The change can be slower or continuous on certain areas or fast in some particular areas. It depends on the capacity of the organization that how efficiently it can implement it. With respect to readiness on the part of organizational members, it depends on the conditions that how much change has occurred already and what are new thrust areas which the organization is touching. If the management faces revocation from the members, then in such circumstances, the change leader will have to stress the innovativeness in the current change initiative to help organizational members to resolve the conflict. Fourth, if we assume that the change which is required in the organization is transformational in nature, it means we are relating it with the fundamental change in the existing culture of the organization to support the significantly revised mission and if not mission, then to change the strategy. When we are talking about the organization culture change, we are thinking of implanting new behavior within and among individuals that leads to new attitude and beliefs, which eventually leads to different values. Organizational culture with strong roots are usually difficult to modify, and sometimes it takes years to bring any change in them. But if the external environment is forcing any change, then the organizational setup ought to change accordingly. Fifth, assessing the real reasons for bringing change can also become an important factor for implementing or driving any change. A substantial and progressive transformation is required if the organization is moving with a constant flow. To draw a dramatic move and make the organization a burning platform in tune with the current prevailing environmental challenges, the management needs to draw reasons for establishing change. Sixth, deals with drawing a picture which describes how the change is going to get implemented, integrated, and sustained. It deals with the very concept of pre launch, launch, post launch, and sustaining the change. Thus, we can say that organizational change is a complex yet an important part of the working of any organization. However, thinking and implementing are two different sort of activities that cannot be assessed precisely and with complete accuracy. What we can best do is to implement the change in sequential steps and make assurance regarding sustaining the change. Organization change turning to the future. In this final section, we are turning towards the future needs and requirements, particularly in context to organization. This section does not deal with the change concept in predictive terms. Rather, it goes for what we need to know more about or to know in more depth. A brief of the 8 areas of organizational change has been explained as follows. Organization change process. Momentum. When we are dealing with the whole change process, the difficult task which remains on the part of management is to sustain the change. For sustaining the change, the management must enable to first assess the organization change momentum. Some suggestions that can be applied here to sustain the moment of change includes keeping people informed, celebrating achievements, and experimenting with new ways of rewarding people for making change happen. Disturbance during transition. When members of the organization are making a shift from the present situation to a future unknown situation, a state might arise when the behavior or events are not controlled by anything. This arises chaos and how it can be reduced during the transition phase can provide a fruitful avenue for research. It depends on the innovativeness and creativity of the leaders to reduce the chaos. Communication. It is more or less a facilitating factor in the entire organization change process. Different parts needs to communicate with each other in order to implement the change. But it is not only the communication, but the timing as well as the quantum of communication that matters at any given time. Organization change leadership, personality and culture. The personal behavioral traits as well as the culture which one upholds develop the leader's personality. A combination of the interaction between the leader's personality and the organizational cultural environment concludes on the behavior one can expect from the leader. However, There are many experts who prefer charismatic leadership as the most superior among any other type of leadership. But sometimes this kind of leadership may fail in certain other more simple kind of situation. This calls for further understanding more about the leadership concept in terms of personality, circumstances, charisma, etc. Power and politics. While going through the concept of power, the leader's capability to influence does have a substantial impact. Now, the question that arises here is to what extent of power a leader use while implementing any change. As there are several types of leadership. On the contrary, there are several types of change. What kind of leadership is required according to different types of change is the main cause of concern. What is the proper balance between powerful leadership and involving organization members in decisions? These are some questions that need research further. Change agent. What are the essentials that a change agent must hold? What kind of stability that is required for the change agent? What amount of emotional and behavioral intelligence is correct? These concerns extend the scope for research. Organization structure. Self-directed groups. As a result of the frequent change in the organizational environment as well as structural adjustments, there has been observed an emergence of self-directed groups who operate more or less on their own with very less supervision. Though this concept has emerged, but it needs further research to know more about their implication. Centralization oblique decentralization. It is an unresolved query to know about the extent of centralization or decentralization. What functions require centralization and what functions need decentralization gives an area for further search. Network. There are actually many networks prevalent in the organizational context. It is structural form which defines the interaction between different organization groups and subgroups. Which type of network is best suited for any organization to increase the efficiency can be researched from a new perspective. Formal and informal rewards. Incentives. To know about different incentives in the form of pay, bonuses, and fringe benefits, we need to know about different elements of its characteristics and the conditions for which they work well and when they do not. What is the significance of these different incentives? How can such incentives schemes be utilized for organizational change? This provides us the reason to get further insight into the aspect. Intrinsic rewards. These are the rewards which cannot be measured in terms of value. These rewards succeed in bringing a satisfaction within the individual, the reason for it being directly related with the work itself. Thus, we need to know more about making the work more satisfying and making the change more acceptable as well as enjoyable. Training and development. Action learning. Even though learning is well known, but it is often not practiced. This is a kind of training and development technique that combines itself with actual problem solving, confronting organization. It is a technique of earning by getting better insight into the actual problems. Thus, we need to know more about the nitty gritty of this problem solving and at the same time learning process and also the reasons why it is not used more often. Training in the service of change. It must be kept in mind that the training program brings certain costs to the organization, so assessing their relevance and making them parallel in contrast with the environmental needs do require attention. Teams and teamwork in organization. There is a certain kind of workforce diversity that the organizations are facing. Building team and emphasizing on the concept of teamwork is the need of the hour. Moving towards this direction, one should know more about such things as relevance of teamwork, elements of high performing team, requirements to attain high degree of commitment from team members, synergy that can be utilized to form collaborative efforts, assumptions that organizational members holds in context to net teamwork, instilling a team culture in the organization and make it last through different structural as well as organizational changes. Organizational size, concentrating on the large and small concept. An organization is made up of many subsystems. Whether we apply change on the whole system or we start from the subsystem, change is bound to happen and organization at the same time is bound to get affected. So the question which arises here calls for deciding on the situation onto which the organization future stands. What are the pros and cons? Forms an interesting question for further research. Size of organizational units. There is no evidence to support what can be the appropriate size to define the organizational units and make cordial adjustments between different activities in an organization. To assess the importance of the size of organization unit develops a fascinating stream of research. Organizational performance. This is an interesting field to research that what are the reliable standards that can be used to appraise and assess the organizational performance. It can be time, finance, enterprise value, or human resource. Actually, it differs from the organization to organization and the prevailing situations in which the business is running. Thus, we need to define and learn more about measuring the organizational performance. Let's summarize what we have learned in this module. The management can never predict precisely what will be the reaction of those elements which are going to get affected. So in true sense, disequilibrium in the existing system is bound to happen. Hence, the management here needs to deal with the disequilibrium and its consequences. The constraints that can arrive while implementing the change needs to be dealt in time. Any way that can reduce the possibility of sustaining the change. Thank you.